Hilchos Brachos, Perek Sheni. The laws of blessings, chapter 2. Yesterday we saw the fundamentals of brachot. The mitzvah, Mishneh Torah, the biblical commandment is to make a blessing after mazon, after eating bread. And the rabbinical obligation is to make a blessing after all foods and also before all foods. So the Rambam is going to go in that order. He's going to start talking about, for a while, Birkat HaMazon. We're going to get a few chapters on the biblical commandment. When and how exactly do you make the grace after meals? And then we're going to go to the other laws of bracha before foods, etc. So we begin today with Birkat HaMazon, Halacha Aleph. Seder Birkat HaMazon kach hi. The order of the Birkat HaMazon goes like this. Rishona, the first blessing is called Birkat Hazan. It's the blessing of Hazan. Hazan et ha'olam, kol b'tovo, Hashem feeds the world. Shniya, the second blessing, Birkat Haaretz, is the blessing thanking Hashem for the land, for Eretz Yisrael. Shlishit, Bonei Yerushalayim. The third blessing is where we ask Hashem to rebuild Jerusalem. Revi'it, the fourth blessing, Hatov v'Hametiv, is the blessing that Hashem is good and that He does good. And the Rambam says that even though the Torah was given with the mitzvah to say Birkat HaMazon, so already since the time of Har Sinai, Jews were saying three blessings after eating bread. Nevertheless, the text of these blessings as we have them today was established over time. Bracha Rishona, the first blessings text, Moshe Rabbeinu tikna. Moshe Rabbeinu made it. When did he make it? Jews were in the desert. The first time the man came down from Shamayim, the Jews were full. Hashem said, Moshe said, we're going to make a blessing to thank Hashem for feeding us. Shniya, the second blessing on Eretz Yisrael, Tiken Yehoshua. Yehoshua formulated the text. Once the Jews came into Israel, the first year that they made their own produce, they farmed the land, they made their own yivul, their own produce, and they harvested it. Yehoshua said, let's make a blessing thanking Hashem for Eretz Yisrael. Shlishi, the third blessing about Yerushalayim, Tiken Davidu Shlomo beno. David HaMelech made it, and then Shlomo HaMelech adjusted it once the Beit HaMikdash was built, and we had the whole Yerushalayim in its completeness. So they made the third blessing. Revi'it, the fourth blessing, Chachmei Mishnah Tiknuha, was made by the sages of the Mishnah. A famous story, close to the Second Temple era, Bar Kokhba made his revolt, and the capital city of the revolt was in Beitar. At a certain point, the Romans took it over, and they didn't just kill everybody, they killed everybody k'mo sh'tzarich. And they didn't allow all the corpses to be buried. For years, people think it was just a couple of days, weeks, for years, they didn't let them be buried. And after a couple of years, the government said that it's okay to bury them, and that was a great miracle because when they came back to get the corpses, all the corpses were whole. They hadn't rotted even one bit. And so the sages made the blessing, Hatov v'Hametiv. Hatov, Hashem did good, that He didn't make the corpses rot, v'Hametiv, and He does good, that He allowed them to be buried, and that's the whole blessing that we have today, the fourth blessing. Halacha bet, hapoalim, shehayu osin melacha etzel ba'al habayit. Workers that were doing work by a homeowner, the achlu pitan, and they were eating their bread. So that means they were on salary. They were getting paid a paycheck. In those days, we're going to see in a second, people used to also work for their food. Some workers would come to the owner and say, listen, give me breakfast, lunch, and supper, I'll work for you. That's called osin bisudatan. They work for their meal. But in the ideal form, a worker works for his money. So if you're a worker working for your money and you're eating your own food, says the Rambam, you have to be super careful with how you treat your employer's time. And therefore, en mevarchin lefaneha, they don't make a blessing before eating bread, because it takes time to go wash and this. Umevarchin la'achar su'udatan shtei berachot bilvad. And after their meal, they only make two blessings in Birkat HaMazon. Kedei shelo yivatlu melechet ba'al habayit, so they don't cancel the work of the homeowner. Bracha rishona ketikuna, the first blessing you make properly, hazan et ha'olam. Shniya, the second blessing you include the second and third. Poteach bebirkat ha'aretz, you open up with the blessing on Eretz Yisrael. V'kolel ba bonei Yerushalayim, you include in it the blessing to rebuild Jerusalem. V'chotem bebirkat ha'aretz, and you conclude with the blessing on the land. I'm going to see if I can bring this onto the screen over here so you can see a little bit, because somehow their projector wasn't working. Yeah, so Rabbeinu Manoach, one of the commentators on the Rambam, he says this is how it looks. Birkat HaMazon for workers, this is the text. Nodeh lecha Hashem Elokeinu, al she'inchalta la'avotenu, eretz chemda tova u'rechava. You thank Hashem for giving us the blessing on Israel. Some say you should add Brit v'Torah. We're going to see in a second that it's very important to the blessing. And you just keep going. V'Yerushalayim irecha, u'machu b'david meshichecha. And then you ask Hashem, u'bnei otah b'mhira b'yameinu, but you finish off, Baruch atah Hashem ala aretz v'ala mazon. You finish with the finishing of the second blessing. That's what the Rambam says over here. Poteach bibirkat haaretz, chotem bibirkat haaretz. You start and end with the blessing of the land, but inside, in the middle, you include the Yerushalayim. Maybe I can do it over here. Let's see. Oh, very nice.
Rabbi, you said no netzilah, no hamotzi?
Huh?
No netzilah, no
No, in those days. In those days. Ve'im hayu osin bisudatan bilvad, but if they were working just for their food, o shehaya ba'al habayit mesevi mahen, or the owner came for lunch to sit with them, then you can assume he's giving them license. So then, mevarchin arba brachot ketikunan, they have to make all 4 blessings after it was done properly, kish'ar kol adam, like any other person. Shulchan Aruch says today that we can assume that employers don't want their workers to work so hard that they have to skip birkat hamazon. So therefore, every worker today, if you eat lunch on your boss's clock, you're allowed to and you have to make nitilah, hamotzi, and full birkat hamazon. Halacha Gimel says the Rambam, birkat haaretz, the blessing on the land, tzarich lomar hodaya bitchilata uvesofa. You have to say the word thanks in the beginning and the end. We do. Nodeh lecha Hashem Elokeinu, right? Nodeh is thanks. And towards the end, you also thank Hashem for the land. The chotemba, and the conclusion, the ending of the blessing is al haaretz v'al hamazon. We thank Hashem for the land and for the food. The chol shelo amar, eretz chemda tova urechava, bibirkat haaretz. If you didn't say these 4 words, the land that is treasured, good and broad, expansive, in the blessing of the land, lo yatzai yedei chovato, you have not fulfilled your obligation because you have to describe Eretz Yisrael in this wonderful way. V'tzarich lahazkir ba, you also have to mention Brit v'Torah, the covenant, we'll soon see what this refers to, and Torah in this blessing, because those are also essential parts of a Jew's connection with Israel. It's a Torah connection, it's a covenant connection with Hashem. It's not just a land that we have like America has a land, Jews have a land. Israel is a holy land. Ulahakdim Brit l'Torah, and you also have to say the word Brit before you say the word Torah. Shehabrit hazot sheomrim bibirkat haaretz hi Brit milah. Because the covenant that we're mentioning in this blessing is referring to Brit Milah. And Brit Milah is the essential covenant that God has with the Jewish people. How many times is Brit Milah mentioned in the Torah? Shenichretu aleha 13 britot. 13 times the word Brit is mentioned in connection with the Brit Milah. The Torah kula, and the whole Torah, nichretu aleha, only 3 britot. Only 3 times the word Brit is mentioned in connection with the Jews and the Torah. Shene'emar, as it says, Eile divrei habrit. These are the words of the covenant, that's 1. Milvad habrit asher karati tam bechorev. Besides for the covenant that Hashem made with us in Har Sinai, atem nitzavim la'avrecha bivrit. You're standing here to pass you through the covenant. So 3 times the Torah mentions Brit in connection with the Jews' bond to the Torah. But when it comes to the Jews' bond with Brit Milah, we have 13 times. The Rambam is going to list them later at the end of this book, in the end of Hilchot Milah. We're going to see all 13 of them. So even chronologically, simply in time, the Brit came before. That's a true point. So you have to mention Brit Milah first, and then Torah. Some texts, I think, I checked out today, the Sephardi text of benching, I think it actually says Brit v'Torah, no? Brit v'Torah, those are the 2 words. In Ashkenaz and in Chabad Nusach, it's more expanded. Al Brit Chachatamta Bivsarenu, about Torah Chashlimatanu, but it's the same thing. You mention Brit v'Torah. They mention them both also? But they say the words Brit v'Torah by themselves, and then check the book. Dalet. Bracha Shlishit, the 3rd blessing. Poteach ba, you open up like this. Rambam gives 2 versions. Either Rachem, Hashem Elokeinu Aleinu, Hashem have mercy on us, Val Yisrael Amecha, Val Yerushalayim Yirecha, Val Tzion Shem Kavodecha, and on Israel your nation, on Yerushalayim your city, and on Zion the tabernacle, the resting place of your honor. O Nachamenu, Hashem Elokeinu, Yerushalayim Yirecha. Comfort us, Hashem, with Yerushalayim your city. Depends on whether they adjusted this blessing after the Churban. Some say that this was made before the Churban, right? So it was Rachem, Hashem should have mercy on Jerusalem. But then after it was destroyed, maybe they changed it to Nachamenu, to comfort us. Today we say Rachem. But you could do both. V'chotem ba, and you end off, Bonei Yerushalayim, Hashem builds Jerusalem, or Menachem amo Yisrael b'minyan Yerushalayim, Hashem comforts His people with building Jerusalem. Ulefichach nikrat bracha zu nechama. Therefore, sometimes in the Talmud, this blessing is called the blessing of comfort, because it's about comforting. V'chol mishalo amar malchut beit David bivracha zu. If you didn't mention the kingship of the house of David in this blessing, lo yatzai yedei chovato, you haven't fulfilled your obligation. Mipnei shehi inyan habracha, because that's the whole content of the blessing. She'en nechama gemura ela b'chazarat malchut beit David. There's no complete comfort for the Jewish people until the house of David comes back to its full glory. Halacha hey. This is all regular Birkat HaMazon. Now, b'Shabbatot u'v'yamim tovim, on Shabbat and holidays, in this 3rd blessing of Rachem Hashem Aleinu, matchil b'nechama u'mesayem b'nechama. You begin and you end with comfort, like we said. V'omer kedushat hayom ba'emtza, and you mention the holiness of the day in the middle. Ketzad, how does this look? Matchil, you begin on Shabbat, let's say. Nachamenu Hashem Elokeinu b'Tzion Yirecha, one of the two versions. Either Hashem should comfort us with Tzion, your city, or Rachem Hashem Elokeinu al Yisrael Amecha v'al Yerushalayim Yirecha, or Hashem should have mercy on the Jewish people and on Yerushalayim. U'Mesayem, and you also end off, Menachem Amo Yisrael b'Binyan Yerushalayim, O Bonei Yerushalayim. You finish off either with the comforting blessing for building of Jerusalem, or just Hashem builds Jerusalem. V'Omer Ba'emtza, and in the middle, b'Shabbat, if it's Shabbat, you say the following paragraph. Again, in today's Nusach, it's a bit different with some variations, but the point is it's all the same. Ritzei v'achalitzenu, it's called. Elokeinu v'elokei avotenu, our God and the God of our fathers. Ritzei v'achalitzenu Hashem Elokeinu. God, our God, you should desire us. V'achalitzenu means you should strengthen us. B'mitzvotecha, and doing all your mitzvahs. U'v'mitzvat yom hashvi'i. Oh, it went away? To bring it back to the workers' bracha. Okay. B'mitzvotecha v'mitzvat yom hashvi'i agadol v'akadosh hazeh. With all your mitzvahs and the mitzvahs of the seventh day, the great and holy one, ki yom zeh gadol v'kadosh hu milefanecha, because this day is great and holy from before you. Nishbot bo v'nanuach bo be'ahava. We're going to rest in it and rest from work in it with love. Ki mitzvat ritzonecha, like the mitzvah of your will. B'ritzoncha, and with your will, hanach lanu Hashem Elokeinu, let us rest peacefully, Hashem. Ve'al tehei alinu tzara v'ra'a v'yagon v'anacha. There should be no troubles and bad and sorrow and moaning. B'yom menuchateinu, on the day of our rest. That's the tefillah that you add for Shabbat. Uv'yamim tovim, and on holidays, Omer Ya'aleh V'yavo. We say like we know in tefillah, Ya'aleh V'yavo, the same thing. V'chein b'rashei chodashim u'v'cholo shel moed, new months, and on chol hamoed, mosif be'emtza b'racha shlishit, Ya'aleh V'yavo. You also add in benching, when you make Birkat Hamazon, in the middle of the third blessing, you add Ya'aleh V'yavo. Vav, b'chanukah u'v'purim. On Chanukah and Purim, mosif be'emtza birkat ha'aretz al hanisim. We added al hanisim, not in the third blessing, in the second blessing. Middle of the blessing on the land. Kederach shem mosif betfilah, the same way you add in davening, in the blessing of thanks by modim, that's where we say al hanisim. B'yom tov or rosh chodesh, shechal liot b'shabbat. What if you have two things come out in the same time? Yom tov, or the new month, coincides with Shabbat. Mazkir ritzei v'achalitzenu tchila, v'achar kach ya'aleh v'yavo. You mentioned both. First, ritzei v'achalitzenu, because Shabbat is more common in festivals. Tadir v'sheino tadir, tadir kodem. We have a rule, if it's more frequent, two things, one more frequent than the other, the more frequent one comes first. And then Ya'aleh V'yavo. V'chein Rosh Chodesh Tevet shechal liot b'Shabbat. That's the longest possible Birkat Hamazon. If you have Rosh Chodesh Tevet, it's the middle of Chanukah, and it falls out on Shabbat, so Mazkir Al HaNisim b'Birkat HaHaretz, or Ritzei v'achalitzenu v'Ya'aleh V'yavo b'Nechama. You have first Al HaNisim, then you have Ritzei, and Ya'aleh V'yavo, all comes together. Halacha Zayin, Bracha Revi'it, in the fourth blessing, Tzarich lahazkir b'shalosh malchuyot. You have to mention 3 times Hashem's kingship. If there's a guest who's making the Birkat Hamazon by the owner of the house, we'll see later in Halacha Zayin, in Perek Zayin, chapter 7, there's a minhag for a guest to lead Birkat Hamazon in the home of the Baal HaBayit, so he can honor the Baal HaBayit. So if you do that, Mosif Ba'bracha LeBaal HaBayit, the guest should add into the text of the fourth blessing, he should add a blessing for the owner of the home. Ketzad, how does this look? Omer, he says, Yiratzon, should be the will of God, Shelo Yevosh Baal HaBayit Ba'olam Hazeh, V'lo Yikalem La'olam Haba. That this owner of this house should not be embarrassed in this world, and he shouldn't experience shame in the next world. V'yesh lo reshut lahosif b'birkat Baal HaBayit u'laha'arich ba. You have permission if you want. You can add to this, if you're eloquent in speaking Hebrew, you can design a beautiful blessing, a poetry or something to thank the Baal HaBayit for whatever he gave you. Halacha chet. Ukeshem mevarchin bevet ha'avel. If you make Birkat Hamazon in the house of a mourner, Omer b'bracha revi'it, in the fourth blessing you should add something about mourning. HaMelech HaChai, these are the words you say. The living king, HaTov v'HaMeitiv, he is good and he does good. Kel Emet, Dayan Emet, the God of truth, the judge of truth. Shofet B'tzedek, judges in justice. Shalit Ba'olamo la'asot bo kirtzono, he rules his world, doing with it whatever he wants. Sha'anachnu amo va'avadav, we are his nation and his servants. Uvakol anachnu chayavin lehodot lo levarcho, and in every situation, even in the case of mourning and death, we're still obligated to thank him and to bless him. You also ask for mercy on behalf of the mourner to comfort him as you wish. You can add again to the blessing of the text of the blessing. The gomer harachaman, and then you finish off with the harachamans, as we're going to see later. The Rambam gives us the full text for the Birkat Hamazon. Harachaman, all those prayers. Halakha tet, bebet chatanim, in the houses of a groom, a chatan. Mivarchin birkat chatanim achar arba brachot elu. We make the blessing of the grooms after these 4 blessings. B'chol su'udah u'su'udah she'ochlim sham, every meal that you eat in the house of a chatan. Ve'en mevarchin bracha zu lo avadim v'lo ktanim. You don't make this blessing if you're a slave or a child. It has to be an adult that's leading the blessing. Ad kama mevarchin brachazu. Until when? How long after the wedding do you make this blessing? Im haya almon shenasa almana. If it was both partners' second marriage, the Rambam describes if it's a widower marrying a widow, but the same is true, Shulchan Aruch says if it's one divorcee marrying another divorcee. Then, mevarchin ota b'yom rishon bilvad. You only make it on the first day of the actual wedding. V'im bachur shenasa almana, or almon shenasa b'tula. But if it was a bachur, in this case it means a virgin, never been married before, marrying a widow, or the opposite, the husband's been married before, but the woman is a virgin, she's never been married before. Mevarchin ota kol shivat yemei mishteh. You make this blessing all 7 days, Sheva Brachot, all 7 days after the wedding. Now, which blessing do you add? Under the chuppah, you make 7 blessings. By Rekat HaMazon, says the Rambam, Halacha Yud, Bracha Zu Shemosifin Bebet Chatanim, the blessing which we add in the house of a Chatan, Hi Bracha Achrona, Misheva Brachot Shal Nisuin. It's only the last blessing of the 7 blessings of the marriage. Bamed Dvarim Amurim, when do we only add the 7th blessing? Kishehayu ha'ochlin, hem she'amdu bibirkat nisuin v'shamu brachot. If all the people at the meal were the same people that were at the wedding and already heard the 7 blessings. Aval im hayu ha'ochlin acherim. But if there's new people, what we call in Shulchan Aruch panim chadashot, there's a new face at the table any time during the 7 days after the wedding. Shalosh shamu birkat nisuin b'shat nisuin. They didn't hear the blessings of the marriage at the time of the marriage. Mivarchin bishvilam achar birkat mazon sheva brachot. After every meal, during those 7 days, we make the full 7 blessings after Birkat HaMazon, if there's a new person there, Kederach Shem Mevarchin B'Shat Nisuin, as we make at the time of the actual marriage. V'hu sheyiyu asara, the chatanim min haminyan, that's provided that there's 10 people, and the chatan is part of the number. Now, in some of the Rambams, this skips halacha Yud Aleph, goes straight to Yud Bet. We were doing Yud, and there's Yud Bet. That's because in some of the texts, we have halacha Yud Aleph, where the Rambam lists all the 7 blessings.
Yeah,
this one has it? Yours has it, or yours skips it?
Mine don't.
Yours skips it. So check on the side. Check on the side in the Shinuyei Nuschaot. On the side column over there, you'll see Halacha Yud Aleph. Yeah, in that small little lettering, you'll see number Yud Aleph.
People who were present at the wedding, where do you insert the one bracha?
At the end of the Birkat, after Birkat HaMazon. I'll tell you why. Because the Rambam lists this whole halacha again in Hilchot Ishut, in the laws of marriage. So the Rambam doesn't usually write things twice. So the commentaries say that it could be that this just came in from the printers. They put it in. It wasn't written by the Rambam himself. But we'll learn it just in case. Okay. Halacha Yud Aleph. Ve'elu hein sheva brachot. These are the 7 blessings. Number 1, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam yotzer ha'adam. The Rambam has the version where the first blessing is this one. We thank Hashem for creating man. Then goes Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shehakol bara lichvado, that He created everything for His honor. Today we do the opposite. Shehakol bara lichvado is first, then yotzer ha'adam. Third blessing, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher yatzar et ha'adam b'tzalmo. He created man in His image, b'tzelem demut tavnito, in the image of the form of His gestalt, of His shape. V'hitkin lo mimenu binyan adei, and He fixed for the man, from him, came from his body, a building of everlasting edifice, which is his wife. Baruch atah Hashem yotzer ha'adam, blessed are you Hashem who created man. So it celebrates the fact that human being was created and then became 2, man and woman. Fourth blessing, sos, tasis, v'tagela hakara. The barren woman should rejoice and be exceedingly happy. When her children gathered back to her in happiness. Baruch atah Hashem mesameach tziyon bevanea. Blessed are you, God, who makes Zion happy with her children. Fifth blessing, sameach tesamach re'im ba'ovim. Hashem should make rejoice these friends and these lovers. Kesamechacha yitzircha began eden mikedem. Just like you made your own creation rejoice in Gan Eden of old. Adam, you made him rejoice with his wife, Chava. Baruch atah Hashem mesameach chatan v'kala. Blessed are you, God, who makes the groom and bride happy. Sixth blessing, which is really the last one. It's really the 7th because you make hagafen before. That's the first one. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. This is the one that you add in the house of a chatan if there's no new face. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. Asher bara. Hashem created sason v'simcha, joy and happiness. Chatan v'kala, groom and bride. Gila v'rina, rejoicing and song. Ditza v'chedva, cheer and delight. Ahava, achva, love and brotherhood. Shalom v'reut, peace and friendship. Mehera, Hashem Elokeinu, God, very fast. Tishama ba'arei Yehuda v'chotzot Yerushalayim. It should be heard in the cities of Yehuda and in the streets of Jerusalem. Kol sason v'kol simcha, the voice of rejoicing and the voice of happiness. Kol chatan v'kol kala, the voice of the groom, the voice of the bride. Kol mitzhalot chatanim michupatam una'arim min ginatam, a voice of grooms rejoicing from their chuppah, from their canopies, and youths from their song. Baruch atah Hashem mesameach chatan im hakala. Blessed are you, Hashem, who makes the chatan rejoice with his kala. Those are the 7 blessings. And we make them if there's someone new, if not, just the last one. Halacha Yud Bet, Shachach. You can see it in this chart over here. Shachach v'lo hizkir b'Shabbat o b'Yom Tov kedushat hayom. You're sitting on Shabbat or Yom Tov, and you forgot to mention the holiness of the day. You forgot Ritzeh, you forgot Ya'aleh v'Yavo. Im nizkar kodem sheyatchil bibracha revi'it. If you remembered any time before beginning the fourth blessing, before starting Hatov v'Hamitiv, then there's a special blessing that you say right there to correct it. B'Shabbat, if it's Shabbat, Omer, you say the followings: Baruch Hashem, blessed is God. The commentaries say it should say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. You say the full beginning. Asher natan menucha la'amo Yisrael, that Hashem gave rest to His nation Israel, le'ot v'librit kodesh, as a sign and a holy covenant. Baruch Atah Hashem mikadesh haShabbat. And that way you're mentioning Shabbat during benching. B'Yom Tov, if it was a holiday, and you forgot the Ya'aleh v'Yavo, but you remembered before you began Hatov v'Hamitiv. Omer, you say also a special blessing. Baruch, blessed is God. Asher natan yamim tovim la'amo Yisrael. He gave holidays to His nation Israel, b'sasonu l'simcha, for joy and happiness. Baruch atah Hashem mekadesh Yisrael v'azmanim. Blessed are you, God, who makes Israel holy and the times holy. Umatchil b'bracha revi'it tegomer, and you begin the fourth blessing and you finish normally. V'im nizkar achar shehitchil b'bracha revi'it. But if you remembered after you started Hatov v'Hamitiv, now posek, you have to stop the chozer larosh and back to the beginning. Just for forgetting Ya'aleh v'Yavo or Ritzeh, and you started the next blessing, you go back all the way,
Even at night?
to the first blessing. Shu birkat hazan, which is the bracha of hazan ha'olam. Halacha Yud Gimel, it's the next slide over here, on Rosh Chodesh, not on holiday. Berashei Chodashim, shachach v'lo amar Ya'aleh v'Yavo. On the new month, if you forgot and you didn't say Ya'aleh v'Yavo, so here, im nizkar kodem shiatchil b'bracha revi'it. If you remembered before the first blessing, the fourth blessing started, same thing. You say a special blessing. Omer, you say Baruch Asher Natan Roshei Chodashim la'amo Yisrael zikaron. Blessed are you, Hashem, that you gave new months to your nation Israel for remembrance. Ve'eino chotem ba, there's no ending. Baruch atah Hashem, etc. Umatchil b'bracha revi'it v'gomer. You begin the fourth blessing and you end it normally. If you remembered after you started the fourth blessing, you finish and you don't go back. And the Rambam here adds, same thing on Chol HaMoed, if you totally forgot and you didn't mention the whole thing in benching, you don't go back. Today, by the way, on Chanukah and Purim, we don't go back, but if you forgot Al Nisim, towards the end of benching, before Harachamanu Yizakenu, you say Harachaman Hu Yaseh Lanu Nisim, Kemo Shasal Lavatena B'Mimim Ezman Hazeh, and you say Al Nisim. But that's only Chanukah and Purim. On Rosh Chodesh, you don't go back at all. Halacha Yudalad, Misha Achal V'Shachach V'Lo Berach. You ate a meal and you forget, you didn't make the Birkat HaMazon. Im Nizkar Kodem She'itakel HaMa'achal She'B'Meyav. If you remembered before you digested the food in your stomach, today the commentaries say it's the time it takes to walk for a meal, which is 72 minutes. According to most opinions, Chozer Mevarech, you can make the blessing, Birkat HaMazon, you go back and you make the blessing. Nit'akel HaMazon shebemeyav, but once the food is digested, that time frame passes, Eino Chozer Mevarech, you cannot go back and make Birkat HaMazon, you lost your chance. Same thing if you're in doubt. And you don't know, did I make a blessing, did I not make a Birkat HaMazon? Even though usually we say Safek Brachot Lahakel, that in doubt you go lenient. But here, because Birkat HaMazon is Mishneh Torah, it's biblical. Whenever you have a doubt about something biblical, Chozer Mevarech, you have to go back and make a blessing again, Birkat HaMazon. V'hu, Shalom Nitakel HaMazon Shebemeyav, so long as you're still within 72 minutes and the food wasn't digested.